Hello everyone, and welcome back to Prager Paints Minis. Today we're going to take a look at how to paint a classic Meganobz model. And this is actually a series of clips essentially that are cut up from my Patreon video. I've started Patreon if you didn't know, and on Patreon I show this same tutorial but with every single brush stroke, and it's a lot more in-depth. So this is the quick and easy version for YouTube, but if it does interest you and you want to have a little more in-depth thoughts, feel free to check out my Patreon. I would really appreciate it. So as you saw, I'm using a mixture of 3 different colors here. Steel Legion Drab adds a little bit of warmth. Orc Flesh Contrast, just to kind of keep that orc green that everyone knows about. And then Caliban Green. This is our base coat, and it's obviously very dark. I have kind of a theory when I paint my orcs that the older they are, the more gnarly they are, the darker their skin color. So I kind of stick with that for Meganobz in particular because that's kind of their whole identity. But I'm basically just slathering this entirely around on all the skin portions, not caring if I go over because we'll just clean that up with black. Next, I add a little bit of moot green to the mix, and this is going to now pick out all the upward facing edges. So you'll see that I'm going to use a smaller brush here. I think this is a size 00 from Artis Opus, but any sort of detailed brush, and I'm following the contours of the muscles and the contours of the face. Now I've gone through a lot of different processes for how I paint my orc skin over the last year or so. I have an entire green orc skin tutorial for those centerpiece models, and I think that's on YouTube as well if you want to check it out. And this is kind of my more batch painting version, where we follow the same steps. I start dark and I just glaze up brighter and brighter, but it doesn't take nearly as long. And I probably did this orc skin within maybe like an hour, maybe an hour and a half max, all the way, including the face details and such that you'll see later. So it doesn't take too long, but it still has a good looking outcome. Now I apologize for my hand being in focus here, but the process is pretty simple. You're just following the edges, and with these older orc sculpts, they have very, very defined edges. So you're just following that along with a lighter and lighter skin tone, and it's pretty self-explanatory. When you're doing this, a lot of it is up to your taste as well. You can decide if you want to follow every single edge. You can decide if you want to do only the upward facing edges. I tend to do a little mixture of both. Now in this particular model, he has metal teeth, which is pretty awesome. So I'm going ahead and putting those in now before I add any more face details. Using the Vallejo Model Air colors, the metallics, they have such good flow, but they sometimes tend to run a little bit. So I want to make sure that if any of it runs, that I'm able to fix that with my green before I continue. And I'm leaving a little barrier between the edge of the metallics and the green that I painted, just to let the paint kind of settle in. But with only 1 or 2 passes of the skin tone, you can add in the metallics and then clean it up pretty easily. And you can see the metal teeth are done. So next I'm using Coelia Green Shade. And this is what I'm going to use to just glaze back into the very recesses. Add a little bit of that orc contrast flesh so it's not quite so blue. And I'm following the contours of the teeth we just painted in. I'm also going to follow the deep recesses in the sculpt for the face and maybe around the muscle bellies. And this will just glaze back in a lot of the shadows before I go back to the highlights and finish with our highlight color. The benefit of using these contrast paints is they'll flow easily into the recesses, and then you don't have to worry about going back and fixing any tide marks or anything. As long as you're just using a little bit at a time and taking your time on this step, it saves a lot of time later. So next up, I took a little bit of corn red and mixed it with a touch of black, and I'm just now filling in the lips, and I'll put a little bit around the eyes. And this is just setting the base color for what will eventually be the more pink color for the lips, and then the yellow color for the eyes. I'll always use this red and black mixture around the mouth, and then I'll add in the teeth or I'll add in the lips later. It just serves as a good little break between the green and sets the base so that there is some separation between the colors. Again, I apologize about the focus catching on my hand here, but I'm just plopping in the color around the eyes. Next, I take yellow, in this case, Uriel yellow, and very carefully, I just dab on the yellow. What you want to do is you want to catch the protrusion. And like I said, with these old sculpts, luckily those edges stick out nicely. So Bugman's Glow is the next color I use. And I'm mixing this with a little bit of our base green and a touch of yellow. And this, as you see, creates kind of like this more natural looking pink green shade. I use just the Bugman's Glow around the lips, and then I'll use the mixture color to pick out the eyebrows and the ears, maybe a little bit of the nose. And once again, we're just adding a little bit of interest separation between the base color and some of these parts that we want to catch the eye, like around the model's eyes or the model's face in general. It breaks it up from the sea of green that can be the rest of their skin color. After I've picked out all the little details of the face, you can see kind of what it looks like. And as you can see, it's definitely a different shade for the face than it is for the arms, for example. And that'll draw your eye towards the face. So now I'm using Rhinox hide here, just a nice deep brown for the pants. Once again, I'm not worried about if it catches on the black. After we fill in all these base colors like the pants, maybe some of the red for the cables, we're just going to go back in with our black and clean up everything. And that's a quick and easy process. So I'm using Mornfring Brown next to pick out the belt around his waist. And when you're choosing your browns, you want to probably stick to maybe 1 or 2 shades. If every single piece of detail on the model is a different shade, not only does it take forever, but the eye kind of can't decide which color it should settle on. Picking up with our gunmetal again, we're going to go around to all the various metallic accents, this chest plate, the rivets, the gears, anything metallic on these Meganobz, since they're the terminators of the orcs. Their body is half metallic anyway. So you're just going to go around the model and slap on all this metal, as I keep saying, not caring too much about being clean because we'll just clean it up later. Each of these Meganobz model has a different little banner. This one happens to have this kind of bone catcher, whatever you want to call it. So I picked out the metallics around that. And next we're moving on to the backpack. For these Meganobz, they have so many little details. If you're trying to paint a bunch at a time, you really want to pick and choose which details you want to pick out and which ones you want to just let slide. I'm going with the double kill saw for this guy. So keeping it simple, I'm painting the saw itself metallic, the kind of the gears around it metallic, and then I think there's maybe 1 or 2 cables that I paint red, but I'm only going with 2 or 3 colors on this thing because we want to move on and paint the rest. Moving kind of quickly here, but like I said, if you want to see every single brush stroke, get all my thoughts, I think I probably have 3 hours of painting condensed into a 30 minutes of tutorial where I go over the whole thing. And that's available on my Patreon at Prager Paints Minis. So we've gotten our guy to this point, and everything's looking good, but it's looking a little too clean. These are Meganobz. So first we're going to dirty up all the metallics with Nuln Oil, classic that you should all probably know about and probably use as well. It's liquid magic, as they say. So we're just going to go ahead and plop that on all the metallics. That way, when we dry brush more metallics in a second, it'll actually catch on the edges and they'll have some separation. So we finished slapping on our Nuln Oil across all the leather, the metallics, the red cables, and we're using our steel color here with a nice small dry brush. Meganobz are, the big guys that get in there and definitely have experienced some battles. So they're going to have some scratched up armor. We're going to use our dry brush in this case because I don't need the clean edges of using a small detail brush to pick out every edge. My dry brush will leave some kind of streaking metals on the black, and that's what we want. We're going to also follow that up with rust in a bit here, so he's going to look very weathered. And the dry brush in this case is a stylistic choice. You can definitely go and pick out every tiny edge with a clean brush if you want to, like a detail brush, but I prefer the look of the more down and dirty dry brush. And that leaves us with our next stage. You can see now all the little edges have been picked out and he's looking much more messed up. So using our Troll Slayer orange and our Mornfang brown, I'm watering this down and I'm putting it around all the different recesses. I will say that for this rust, I very much just follow what I want to as opposed to what is realistic. So this goes back to the rule of cool. And as I do this, I'm trying to pick out any place that I think looks too monotone. So if it's too black and silver, there's no red or green near it, I want to break that up with the orange brown color. And for the case of this guy, I went kind of overboard. I went to the max here just to show you what it could look like. Not all of my Meganobz will be quite this rusty, but I think that this will be a good way to show you how I achieved the look. And then you can decide how much you want to actually add on your own models. One arm I haven't yet finished, but you can see where he's at now. With our more extreme version of the rust, as I said, you can kind of add as much or as little as you like. We're going to go back to that steel color, and now I'm going to pick out some scratches here. I went a little fast here, just slapping it on. If you want a more kind of consistent width, then I would just slow down just a touch. That one might be a little bit wider than I would like, for example. I kind of like this level of scratch where it's a little more thin, but we're talking Meganobz. They're catching bullets, they're catching blades, and it's a perfect model to really paint up quickly if you need to and get them on the battlefield. So you can see on the left one I had finished previously, on the right we had done in our tutorial today. I hope you found this useful, and if you would like to see more, subscribe or go ahead and check me out on Patreon.